I'd quote Dr. Malaku Warede from Ethiopia, who years ago in the first meeting of the Commission said that it was the part of biodiversity that feeds people. It's the essence of human life. We deal here in the Commission with all of the critical genetic resources, the critical materials we need, the building blocks of our food system. Bringing everybody together, I think. It's played an absolutely essential role in bringing diverse parts of the food system at the beginnings of the food system, and the first links in the food chain, in a sense, around animal and livestock genetic diversity and plant genetic diversity and aquatic diversity and microbes and so on, around the same table to really see how they fit together. Doing that has been essential. It's also been essential that it came at exactly the right time. It came ahead of the curve on critical issues around genomics in the food supply, around when major changes were about to take place in the food system. It was actually here and in place and enabled to address that confluence of pressures, public and private pressures, intellectual property pressures, pressures of new technologies that were on the horizon, but most governments hadn't even seen them yet. But the Commission was far-sighted enough to actually, again, create itself, be here, and actually be able to address those questions way ahead of everybody else. And it's managed to maintain that capacity ever since then. It's still ahead of where other UN agencies are in these issues. It's ahead of where governments are in their own thinking, usually. If the Commission didn't exist, we wouldn't have the work that was done on plant genetic resources or the International Seed Treaty. Beyond that, because that was its initial work, was really just around plants, we would never have had the other services in FAO and livestock and fisheries and forestry and so on saying, hey, we've got genetic resources too. We also have to address these questions. That work wouldn't have even begun, I don't think. And then, of course, the Commission finally brought that all together into one place so that all of the genetics in food and agriculture are here in one spot. And again, that could not have happened. If it hadn't existed as well, if it hadn't been born in the 1980s, I don't think it would have been created today. I don't think that it would have been the farsightedness on the part of governments or the willingness or the courage on the part of a lot of bureaucrats, frankly, to take it on and put it in place the way it has been put together. So because it existed, this Commission was able to be the first body in the United Nations that looked at issues of biotechnology and the concerns around biotechnology, both positives and negatives. It was the first body in the United Nations system to address the issue of corporate concentration in the food chain. No one else looked at that. It was the first body in the United Nations to look at, again, intellectual property around genetic resources, and to look at farmers' rights, to recognize that a lot of the intellectual capacity, almost all of the intellectual capacity, in fact, around livestock breeding and plant genetic resources comes from farmers, from pastoralists as well. So those are innovative areas of work which the Commission started, which have now become logical to the rest of the UN system even. So when we see other bodies that were created afterwards, a decade later with the creation of the Biodiversity Convention, more recently with the creation of IPBES, this Intergovernmental Policy Platform on Biological and Ecosystem Services, we see those bodies being created. They take with them the experience of the Commission. They add their elements to it, and their particular focus is slightly different. But some of the key aspects of the Commission in terms of its integration of a wide range of sectors, recognizing their holistic nature, the need for the involvement of again, civil society actors, the basic producers in the system, the need to look broadly at the agenda in terms of intellectual property questions, corporate concentration questions, and so on. That sort of social policy area goes everywhere else now. And it goes everywhere else because of the work of the Commission. The Commission is putting together its State of the World report on agriculture and food systems at a time when science is saying that we really have a convergence of science and technology as well. And governments talk about bits, atoms, neurons, and genes all coming together, or the convergence of biology, physics, and chemistry into one basic science built around the atom or at the nanoscale. Well, the work that's being done in genomics here in the Commission is its grasp of sort of the living nanoscale, of the living materials that are needed to sustain life, puts it at a really key place. And it's needed now, perhaps more than ever, because we're losing more diversity than ever, and we need to protect it and preserve it. But also, it has the job now of looking ahead and saying, well, what will these new technologies do to us? Will they be beneficial, or will they have a negative impact on our ability to maintain diversity? So its role is if it can grasp it, and I think it is grasping it with this new State of the World report, if it takes that on in the way it should, then I think that it's, again, absolutely precisely where the world needs it to be. Well, I think I kind of grew up here, or I grew old here. It's more accurate, I grew old here. I was involved in the negotiations since the 1970s that led to the Commission being created in 1983. And I was heavily involved in all of the politicking around that. It was not an easy birth, creating the Commission. It was a very political decision by governments to have it put in place, and it was very much opposed by some governments. And so I guess from that initial experience of seeing it born, and then being at it and attending it all of these 3 decades now, it's a place that is comfortable for me in a way. It's a place that is still absolutely exciting. It's a place where I meet old friends and old enemies who, in a way, as the decades go by, even the old enemies have become old friends in a peculiar kind of way. There's been a lot of crossbreeding, I guess, in the Commission over time. And it's become a community of people that cuts across north and south, and it cuts across the geographies of different regional identities, and lets people sit down together and talk about a common shared passion, which is the conservation of the first links in the food chain.